your vote on SSPTV News.
And welcome to Your Vote 2020 via Zoom. We're here tonight. The entire panel's here tonight, folks, and we're going to be talking, giving you a lot of great information. As usual, it'll be fun and it'll be informative. I would like to welcome our panel. Of course, we're going to start with Mike DeCosmo, who is the Hazel Township tax collector and was the former Luzerne County Democrat chairman. He is a professor and retiring this year. I cannot believe it, but he's retiring. Okay, then we have Charles McAwee, no stranger to us. And Charles, assistant editor in City Journal. Rick Morelli, who is the former council president of Luzerne County Council. And of course, our own Tara Toohill, the state representative. I want to welcome all you to our group tonight. There's certainly a lot of things happening, craziness. I can't explain it. I'm sure it's just everyone's just bewildered at what's going on in the country today. So what I'd like to do is just get a comment from all of you as to what you think and how you feel about the current situation. Then we'll get specific with the COVID and the riots and the whole nonsense that's going on. Mike, let's start with you.
Sammy, much different times. I'd have to go back to the 60s. Obviously, we were talking about some of the racial tension, racial unrest. I was in junior high school at the time, actually, and COVID, something we've never experienced. Typically, on a night like tonight in the primary election, I would be telling you my face is red today from standing outside in the sun all day and getting a windburn. But actually, I'm one of the people who voted by mail. I did stop by the poll just to see, to make sure that my vote was in. I was afraid that something possibly could have happened with the mail, but my vote was recorded or was received. So, I found it to be a smooth process and a little lighter turnout than usual at the polls. So we'll have to see how many people actually voted by mail just to see how much interest there was. But frankly, on the Democrat side, there wasn't a whole lot of reason for the Democrats to go to the polls today. The only real contested race statewide was the Auditor General race. So I'd expect a much bigger turnout on the Republican side as we look at some of these numbers, which we may not get the final numbers for a few days.
Charlie, your comment.
It's an unbelievable time. The worst pandemic in over 100 years, the worst economy since the Great Depression, and civil unrest that we have not seen since the late 60s. And in some ways, you can argue this is worse than the Depression because at least during the Depression, there was unity in this nation. And the sentiments that we're seeing across the country among Americans, whether it's fear, anger, anguish, panic, shock, those sentiments certainly apply to the local level too, and the greater Hazleton area, as well as Luzerne County. And in the midst of all this, we're proceeding with a primary election, one that is also unprecedented since we are carrying out reform measures that were signed into law by Governor Wolf in the fall of 2019. Nobody foresaw what would happen today, but we're proceeding with a primary that requires us to go on, but and somehow pull this off, our civic duty to vote.
Rick, your comment?
Yeah, obviously echo with everyone said so far, but again, crazy times here with the COVID, along with all the unrest that we have going on here. But when I look at everything that's taking place, what's interesting about it all is that I think we're all being educated as to how much politics plays into effect. What we've seen with the COVID, when it comes down to the governors in the states that was interesting, the fact of the states that opened up that are blue versus red, taking a look at the civil unrest here going on now and what's taking place in the cities and in the certain states. And again, the politics that are taking place. So again, the bad news is that it's affecting our lives in ways that we've never seen and probably never see again. But the fact is that I think people are getting educated as to how much politics plays a role in our lives on every day, whether that's good or bad.
Well, Tara, I guess you're in the thick of things, and I would not want to be you. And I want everyone to know that Tara will be on my show. We are doing a special Sam Lassant show Thursday. She'll be on the show. Tara, I guess you could go on for hours, but give me your opinion as a state representative of what you see and how this, a general opinion.
Well, first off, just with the coronavirus crisis, really, I've never experienced anything like that in 10 years of public service. Obviously, it's completely unprecedented. But right now, we're kind of on the downward trend, but we're still dealing with extremely high unemployment. Youth are not in schools, they're not being seen by their teachers regularly or by school nurses, even by pediatricians. We have all of our older youth that are sent home from the big cities. They've lost their jobs. They can't go to college classes. So really right now for the youth in Pennsylvania, they're going through a very difficult time. And then every day I have my senior citizens in this district that they're calling on the phone and they are tremendously isolated and extremely afraid of what they're seeing on television. We have letters coming in there. We have emails, family members that can't see their parents in nursing homes, and people feel very isolated. So just socially, I think this has been a very difficult time. And it's really time that people just cannot go on in the way that they are anymore. And part of this unrest in this country, I think, is a direct result of that. If you're home and you're unemployed and you can't go out and you can't have physical touch just of shaking someone's hand or seeing a loved one, really it's just this perfect storm. You have the COVID crisis, you have the election, you have this isolation, you have this unemployment. It's just a complete tornado that it's horrible to watch on television, and you fear for your communities. So it's very difficult.
Staying with you, Tara, I'm going to pick up on what Morelli said about the politics that are being played right now, and you're living in the thick of it. And this is just general what we're seeing. And I guess it's most unfortunate to a degree that we have to have politics come into reasoning, particularly when it affects all of our lives. So staying with you on the political issue that you're facing every day, what's your opinion on that?
I do think that there are a lot of political motivations, and we knew this was going to be a difficult year election-wise. In 2019, in the state house, you have Republicans and Democrats in 2019 that were willing to sponsor bills together and work together, and everyone has this camaraderie. And we kind of knew going into 2020 that would not be lasting long, because we're going into this huge presidential reelection or not reelection. So I think that even if you try to avoid politics, and then during the coronavirus crisis at the very beginning, we wanted to work together. We should be opening food banks together. We should be helping families together. And that it just started to get very politicized. When we did this vote, this was a bipartisan vote originally to change the way that we vote here in Pennsylvania. I voted for mail-in ballots, and it's just hard to watch, I guess, and see. Now everyone is confined to their homes. We're supposed to be, you're not supposed to leave. You're confined to your homes. You order everything on Amazon, but you can't buy things from small businesses. The small business owners are reaching out constantly. They're in such a bad way. The mom and pops, but yet everything is big box stores, and it's just everything is mail in. You could basically live virtually like this. We could never leave our homes, and we could forget American life as we used to know it. And that's very scary. We're talking about, when do we get to go back to church? That people have to ask their government when they can go back to church is very, quarantine is supposed to be temporary. Quarantine is not supposed to be our new normal. So we're just in unprecedented times, and there's a lot of politics going on. It depends on what channel you're watching, really.
Rick, your opinion.
I agree with what she said, and we are in unprecedented times. But again, it's kind of funny that you look when you look at what's going on right now, we're just going to the yellow. People still can't get their hair cut, but about 100 miles down the road, people are protesting all over the place, and there's no one's wearing masks. And again, all of a sudden, a week now, you don't hear anything about the COVID, nothing about it, where it really dominated the airways. So before, I mentioned before about politics, and I think the other subject that we need to start paying attention to is really the press and the media, as to which way they steer us, as to what the hot topic is today. And I think the good news is that people are becoming smarter and able to read in between the lines and be able to make their own decisions. I mean, there's a new thing out there called social media. And it's something that sometimes the press and media don't like. Again, let's take a look at what's going on with Twitter, our First Amendment. So we're going, not only are we talking about the COVID, not only are we talking about what's going on in the streets, but the fact of how things are changing with our voices out there. And, you know, personally, I'm not so upset about what's going on right now in the streets. Let me rephrase that. I'm upset about it. I'm not so concerned that it won't be here for so long. We've been through this in the past. We'll get through it. And part of it is just the political fire pit that we're in right now. And again, I think there's a lot of blame. But at the end of the day, when people keep blaming politicians, we all have our own selves to be responsible for. Okay, no politician's telling anybody to go out there and steal and to and loot the stores that are out there. And so, you know, the people need to look at themselves and ask, what are we? We all represent the country. It's just not the politicians.
Charlie, your input. You want to hit your button there, Charlie?
Can you hear me now? Yes.
I can hear you now. I'm sorry.
Great. And even this is unprecedented, a Zoom election.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Yeah, we're adjusting to everything. But I was going to say, it certainly feels like the nation is suffering from a nervous breakdown right now. And there are so many factors in play. It started with the pandemic, of course, and then transitioned with the lockdowns, which were necessary initially because the pandemic is in response to this mysterious virus from Wuhan, China, the same region that in part fueled the fentanyl epidemic that devastated communities like Hazleton. A terrible irony. And in addition to that, of course, we're seeing the rioting go on in American cities in New York and Philadelphia, not that far away. And in addition to that, you have segments of the press that are excusing that violence, in addition to local elected officials in these cities that aren't effectively responding to it. It's total pandemonium. And in the midst of this, of course, we have a primary night. People went out to vote today in Pennsylvania. How will they respond? That's the important question, because a Washington Post poll a few weeks ago indicated that Governor Wolf had 70% approval among residents of Pennsylvania, which I find peculiar and hard to believe, considering the suffering that so many people endured, whether small businesses or just in Hazleton, which became a hotspot, the elderly who live in this area who were fearful to go out because of what was going on and felt that the governor was indifferent to the enormity of the crisis here. So you have a governor who isn't effectively responding to what's going on in Philadelphia. You have the governor who perhaps took it too far and didn't consider the nuance and the complexities of this always fractious state, that what a pandemic will impact Wellsboro or at a local level differently than when suburban Philadelphia. So you have all these segments in play, and we won't know the election results necessarily tonight, but in the coming weeks, what will they tell us? And we'll find out.
Michael, your comments. Wait, Mike, we're gonna get you back on your audio. Mike? Janine?
Am I back on?
You're back on. I'm sorry.
Okay, good. Okay. Yeah, a lot of excellent points by everyone in the panel. One thing Charlie just touched on was that 70% approval rating for Governor Wolf. I could tell you as a Democrat, there was someone in my office today that told me they felt that Governor Wolf was the worst governor we've ever had, and they may never vote Democratic again. But I think when we look at a state like Pennsylvania, Sammy, which according to all demographics is the second oldest state in the union, I think the people who were most concerned and most conservative with this whole pandemic crisis were the senior citizens. So I think the older the people are, the more conservative approach they wanted to take to the entire pandemic. And the one point that Tara made, which I just want to expound on, and I mean this sincerely, I don't think what's happening with the rioting and what happened with the pandemic are mutually exclusive. I look at the large number of people out there protesting. What I'm seeing is an awful lot of young people. When I say young, 25, 30, and I'm looking at a lot of people, there are a lot of white people marching, especially down the Philadelphia area, if you look at who's been protesting. But I'm saying, how are these people out there? Well, because of the pandemic, we've gone from a 3% unemployment rate in this country to close to 20%. That means people have a lot of time in their hands that they wouldn't have if they were working. But the fact that we have such a high unemployment rate, it gives people a lot more time to do things and engage in activity that they normally wouldn't be involved with.
The interesting things that you're saying, all of you are saying, is that you're looking at the politics of this and the fear that the press giving particularly seniors. And the poor seniors always get dumped on for some reason. However, who do you believe? Who do you really believe these days? I've said many times I'm embarrassed to be in this business anymore when you see the slanting and the lying that's going on with the news. And it's just not me. Mike, you said you had someone in your office today. It doesn't surprise me that the Washington Post or New York Times would come out and say that these guys are doing great. But if you go and talk to your neighbors and talk to some other people, for a few that are, you find a lot of different things happening. And Tara gets that every day. She gets that every day. Before I go to break, I want to come back and talk about some specifics on the how do we cope, particularly the fact that we have to wear masks, we have to do this. Now, I just did an interview with John Fletcher and Dr. Valence and Dr. Miller. That's airing right now. It was a great interview, and they're saying about the fact to keep the mask on and the social distancing and the washing hands, and I understand that. The same token, we're reading some news about where the masks are really not that effective. So we're troubled here, and I want to go to Tara when we come back to respond on that. We're going to take a break right now. Stay with us. I hope everything's working with the Zooms. I appreciate your patience out there. We'll be back right after these messages.
Your vote on SSPTV News.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to Your Vote 2020 on SSPTV. And also, we want to thank the standard speaker. You see Janine Lassant's name on the screen. She is administering all of the Zooms for us. This is a first for us, so please bear with us. But we're bringing a lot of, I think, valuable information. My guests tonight, Mike DeCosmo, Charlie McAwee, Rick Murley, and Tara Toohill, are regular responders to our elections. Tara, we were discussing before we went on, we hear so much about the mask, and here again, no doctor by no means, and I interviewed tons of them. But in the same token, we are hearing some people who are getting sick from wearing the mask, it can't breathe properly. But some doctors are saying that the mask really are not that effective as they're trying to make it that effective. Now, how do you respond to that? Have you heard anything about that?
Yes. So masking has become very controversial. And I think that when the epidemic started, that at first people didn't want to wear masks, and then we were told to wear masks. And in Pennsylvania, when the governor went ahead and he was talking about, it was May 14th, declared wearing an exhalation barrier mask was optional for the primary. So May almost a month before the primary, we started talking about masks at the primary. We've had incidences where people that do not wear masks have been shamed, which has been called mask shaming. We have, inappropriate wearing of masks. But looking back, this Friday, the World Health Organization said that, if you are not sick, if you're not caring for someone who's sick, then you do not have to wear a mask, basically, to summarize. That it would be more used where a doctor is caring for someone that has COVID-19 or a family member is with someone that has COVID-19.
Before we go further, I want the viewers to know that Charlie Pedri will be calling in. For my guest, if I interrupt you, that means he's calling in. We're going to go to the break and come back and talk to Charlie. But let's continue on with this. Mike, what is your opinion about the mask and where we're going and the fear that they put in everyone's?
Well, you know what, Sammy? Once they came out and said everyone should be wearing masks, me, like a lot of people, went out and got masks. We require everyone who comes into our office to wear a mask also. So far, that's what we've been doing. We've just been following directives. As Tara pointed out correctly, in the last, I guess, week to 10 days, there's been some conflicting evidence, whether or not the masks are really needed and some of the side effects. I could tell you, when I wear a mask, if I go into a supermarket for a 10-minute time span, by the time I come out, generally I'm sweating. And I've known one car accident one of my clients claimed they were in because they sort of blacked out from wearing the mask. They said they were having a hard time breathing. So are there definitely some side effects? Jury's still out? Absolutely. Right now, it seems the benefits far outweigh the cost from everything I've seen, and I'm still wearing my mask.
Charlie?
Well, it's funny. I mean, there's a lot of complexity here, but I can't help but think back to Dr. Anthony Fauci, who at one point said we did not have to wear masks, dismissed it, then said it was absolutely imperative to wear masks. And now Fauci, who a month ago was the most hailed, celebrated man in America, you can argue he's the most irrelevant man in America, considering everything going on in the country in the midst of this pandemic. It's a tough call. We need to get out of these lockdowns, full stop. We have to transition into a normal economy, even if the pandemic still exists. You can make the argument that wearing the mask at a minimum may be necessary to proceed with that course. Because if you're going into a restaurant, let's say you're picking up pizza at a local pizza parlor, and you see the cooks and they're young kids, they're not wearing masks. They may be asymptomatic carriers. That may scare a lot of people. After all, it was only a month ago that the New York Times put Hazel's on the front page that this was the nation's hotspot. So if you're going to the doctor's office, if you're running errands, those masks may be necessary. The verdict's out, but I think the lockdowns have to end, but the masks are a tougher call.
Mr. Morelli.
Yes, Sam. So, since the beginning, we've been following data, we've been following statistics, and I've been looking at, I am a statistic. Back on March 27th, I was diagnosed with COVID somehow. Didn't have any symptoms, didn't have anything. I quarantined for the amount of days, stayed away from my son for over 8 days, and did everything I had to. After I was done quarantining, I went out and I gave plasma twice. I went out to New Jersey once, and I went up to Pittston, obviously assuming I had the antibodies and to helping people, etc. Later on, when the antibody test came out, I decided to go get the antibody test just to double check, because we've been hearing so many different conflicting statements out there. I got the antibody test in early May, and it came back negative. So what does that tell you? It tells you that at the beginning, like Tara said, we didn't have to wear the mask. Then you had to wear the mask. Before, CDC said you could, if you touch a package, you may be able, if you go to the store, you touch a package, you may get it. Now they're saying you don't. Now we're hearing different things with the mask. I'm not saying that these people don't know what they're doing, but there's definitely a lot of conflicting statements out there. And it definitely causes a lot of frustration out there. And the fact that when you can't go out and get a haircut, you can't go out to the store, you have to live your life in a different way. It's frustrating. And then when you see other things taking place with inconsistencies out there where, again, you have hundreds of people in the streets walking around and no one's all of a sudden concerned about the COVID. Yet, as we said, you can't still go to church and do the things. It's frustrating. So again, there's a reason why people are frustrated over this, because of the inconsistencies that we've seen out there.
looking at the inconsistencies, again, some of the comments that are made, how politics affects our lives. And it's so important, Tara, because what you do in the state of Pennsylvania as a politician, it's affecting our lives, as with Governor Wolf. Whether he is doing the right thing or the wrong thing, I don't know. But you have had some bills that you want that were presented that the governor vetoed. So I'm going to go to you, and then I may interrupt you because we're waiting for Dave Pedri to give us a call. So Tara, tell us about those bills and what they meant to achieve.
So one of the pieces of legislation we passed out of the House was to open real estate in Pennsylvania. We have realtors, we have people that are homeless that could not get housing. Realtors were out of work. They were unable to collect unemployment because the state unemployment system was broken. And we were one of the only states that did not have real estate open. At one point, we were one of only 2 states that was not open for real estate. And at last count, we were the last state. So Pennsylvania was very restrictive. In the governor's initial order, he just shut you down if you were not a life-sustaining or considered essential business. And then immediately after that, we started getting inundated with phone calls about how owners of small businesses were saying, well, I am essential. And then we created a waiver process because we called so much for so many different businesses and constituents. The governor created this waiver process. So it has been a very difficult time. But so he ended up vetoing that real estate bill that we had to open for the realtors in Pennsylvania. And then literally an hour and 20 minutes later, the governor then, by his own executive order, decided how he wanted to open real estate in Pennsylvania. So we have had just executive order after executive order, and the state house, we're considered closest to the people. Our districts are smaller than a state senator's district. And we have been dealing with this first response of what's been going on economically, from the people out of work, trying to collect from a broken system, to these small business owners who are saying, why can you buy a bike at Walmart, or you can order one online through Amazon, but you can't come to the bike shop that's a mom and pop, and we can't operate safely. So one of the bills we had that he actually vetoed again about 2 weeks ago, we tried to do a veto override and we fell short this week. Well, actually last week. We voted very late on Thursday evening, and we came short of the votes. But it's for reopening these businesses safely.
Tara, hold that thought. When we come back after break, Dave Pedri joined us, and we want to ask him a few questions about what's happening in terms of the mail-in ballots. Heard a couple things today that were not encouraging, and I hope Dave will be able to clarify them. So we're going to go to break right now. And we'll come back. We'll talk to Dave Pedri.
Your vote on SSPTV News.
Welcome back to Your Vote 2020 on SSPTV, and also in cooperation with the Hazelton Standard Speaker. My guest panelists, Mike DeCosmo, Charles McAwee, Rick Morelli, and Tara Tuahill. And joining us now is our county chairman, county manager, Dave Pedri, not Charlie Pedri, but Dave Pedri. Dave, thanks for joining us.
Sam, thank you so much for having me on. And I've been called much worse than that, so don't worry about it.
Dad, don't forget. Okay. I want to talk about, well, first of all, how did the day go? How did the day go for you?
Well, listen, it was an extremely busy day, and but I do want to say that thanks to the hard work of the people of the Election Bureau, it was not the perfect election. Obviously, that was not a height that we could not reach, but it went as well as possible. Let's face it, to the challenges that we have had here. I mean, you're looking at, this is the first time we've ever had paper ballots. You're looking at, this is the first time we've ever had mail-in ballots. This is the first time we had to consolidate places. All these different things had to happen in the middle of a pandemic. With all these factors in play, I think we did a pretty good job.
Okay, so I want to ask you a question. I spoke to someone today. Walk me through when someone goes in to do to vote on the paper, the vote today. How do they do that?
On the paper ballot?
When I went to vote today, walk me through as to what do I get and what.
Sure.
What do you do?
So this was only in place, obviously, for today, for the primary election. But what's going to happen is you walk in and you sign in on the electronic poll book. You are then provided with your ballot. Your ballot then is given to you. You take that ballot behind a privacy screen. You fill out the circles of people you want to vote for, kind of like a Scantron test. Then you take that ballot and you feed it into the central tabulator that actually counts your vote.
Okay, now you're saying you take the ballot and you feed it into a central what?
Tabulator, a scanner.
Okay, now evidently in one of the polling posts that wasn't the case. The person who voted had to give some people their vote, and therefore what they voted was exposed from what they said. So
yeah, that shouldn't have happened.
Okay, so he should have, or she should have taken that vote and put it into where, so no one knows what they voted.
There's these, they're big black machines. They kind of look like actually garbage cans. That would have happened. I'm not sure of the specific incident you're talking about, but that judge of election should have allowed the voter to do that themselves, unless there was a problem. Sometimes there's a problem. You have to go over and help that individual, but the voter themselves should have fed it into the tabulator.
Okay. For the panel, if anyone, I'll start with, let me start with you, Rick, to ask any question to Dave. Rick?
Well, again, I refuse to go and mail in to vote. I went myself, and to be honest with you, I really didn't know what to expect. Although I did go to the wrong precinct, but not today's fault. But it was pretty smooth. I will say, though, not out of, I went to Sugarloaf. Everyone said it was fine. It was not a high vote turnout over there, which I expect throughout the county for the most part. But I will say that when you did go through the scanner, they're educating individuals to put it in there, and I'm assuming those would not want to do it. So someone is right there and probably can see what you put in. It's just common sense and would have to. But, these are just some of the things that you have to go through. And again, I've talked to Dave here over the last number of months, back and forth of what's going to take place. I've echoed some things I've heard out there to some concerns people have had. And you got to remember, and Dave could elaborate on this, about 6 months ago, more than that, we were mandated by the governor to go and buy new voting machines, which we had to go spend money through the county, which are there, but they're not being used today. And so, again, I think maybe it would be wise for maybe Dave to elaborate on those voting machines as to what to expect in November versus what we saw today.
Before we go there, I just want to give our viewers an update that so far, Jim Bognet is leading the field in the race for the Republican nomination. So he's leading the field right now in terms of 77 and 186 precincts that have been reported. It looks like Jim Bognet so far is leading the field. Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you want to get back to Dave?
No, yeah. To answer Rick's question, yeah, honestly, so the Governor Wolf put a mandate on that we had to move to paper trail machines. So the paper trail is either done by what's called a ballot marking device, which is the machine that you would actually touch the screen and then it would print out the ballot, or actually filling out the ballot like you did today. We chose to do the fill out the ballot like you did today because of the coronavirus. But in November, we will be utilizing the ballot marking devices. So when a voter goes out to utilize a ballot marking device, they're going to punch in the same thing. It's a touch screen, and then it's going to print out your ballot. and then you take that ballot and feed it into a tabulator. I will take what the information you gave us about people standing near the tabulator. I'll take that back to the Election Bureau for their review.
Mike, you have any questions for Dave?
No, Dave. My only concern, but then I am a doubting Thomas sometimes, so I had to go check for myself. I guess I received my ballot, which I mailed back last Tuesday. It was a week ago, Tuesday, after the application process. And I just wasn't sure whether it would be there in time so that I wouldn't have to go vote today. So I did go check at the polls. They did receive it in less than a week's time. So I was impressed by that. And they said I didn't have to vote again today. So Dave, I guess my question is, what's the typical turnaround time on something like this from the time I mail this from Hazleton till it gets to Wilkes-Barre and it gets recorded so that when I go to the polls, I know my vote has been received and not lost in the mails?
So what we've seen today, I apologize, some issues. What we've seen today, it has been that when a vote comes in, what happens is that individual, it's mailed to that individual, and then that vote is mailed back. So the issue is really the Postal Service and how long does it take? What we've been looking at is honestly about a week to, sometimes less than a week. But the best thing that you can do, honestly, is drop it off. So in the November election, you'll be able to drop off your ballot at the Election Bureau, at the Hazleton Post Office, at the Wilkes-Barre Post Office, or at your poll. You could actually walk into your polling place and provide them with your mail-in ballot. You didn't have a chance to do it, you could do that in November. It's a long process, and we're all 7 counties across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Today was the first day in Commonwealth history we've ever had the mail-in ballot process.
Okay. My Bijan wanted to get into the act here. Tara, you have any questions for Dave?
Yes. First off, just excellent job. I know you've had to hire and redeploy workforce to meet all of our conditions that we've had on this new election. So thank you for that. And I know, I'm sure it's been very trying. I have a 2-part question. Really is, so can you explain for the folks out there how labor intensive this process was of getting the application, and then what your staff had to go through? And then just that we did get a number, like a small number of folks where they received a Republican ballot instead of a Democrat ballot, and small errors like that, and what you predict to be the percentage of human error that you're looking at.
Sure. Obviously, like I said, this was the first time we've ever done this. We had an incredible amount of people who applied for the mail-in ballot. 53,000 Luzerne County voters applied for the mail-in ballot. It's an incredible amount, especially when you consider in 2016 presidential primary, which was a contested primary, only 80,000 people voted. So of the 2016 primary, we're up over 50% of that already. So when a person does file their application, what happens is, I love people who just said, oh, what's so hard? Take the ballot, stick it in an envelope, send it to me. It's not that simple. What we have to do is you take the application and then you enter it into the state system. The state system is very intensive. Everything has to be typed in by hand. And then it has to be double checked by a second individual. And then a label has to be printed out. And then that individual is provided with their ballot, which has to be printed out by a third individual, and then have 2 separate envelopes sent out to that individual. And then it's all packaged up and mailed to that voter. And then that voter fills out their ballot, puts out the 2 envelopes, and mails it back. And then we have to open up both envelopes. It is an incredibly labor-intensive process, and I'm hoping state legislators like yourself will take the advice of some counties and say, there's got to be an easier way to do these things. Maybe let us start opening up the ballots, not counting them, but let us open up the ballots on the Saturday before the election. I think that would be a great move. Maybe we do things a little bit easier so that we're able to adjust as we can in the county. For example, maybe move the date back 2 weeks from the time of election as opposed to the 1 week that we had. That way, if there are any problems, like you said, where somebody got the wrong ballot or something along those lines, we can fix them. But we had a much shorter window in this one in June. Obviously, we processed 53,000. This is the first time we've ever done it. We're assuming probably 5 to 10% human error has gone into it. We fixed those things as best we possibly could. And I personally made a lot of phone calls to voters myself. everybody's been really reasonable. The nice thing about it is, even if you didn't get the ballot, even if you didn't get your mail-in ballot, you can always go vote at the polls. That's a way to always try to make sure that that is clear, the same way Mr. DeCosmo did. Hey, I just want to make sure you got this. Yes, we did. We're good. And if they didn't get it, you can fill out a provisional. There's always a way for you to vote in Pennsylvania.
Now, did he answer your second question, Tara?
Yes, it is. And I did vote in person today. And it was, I thought, a very positive experience. And they did have to feed it through for me, but then I got to see that it did go through. The ballot went through the feeding machine, and then it tells you right there what number you were when you voted. So it was probably 6 o'clock. I was number 172, and it was a high turnout in Butler Township. So, but I could see that it went through because I know there were some questions about that.
Yeah, the idea is with these machines is that you're going to check to see how many people voted on the election on the sign-in sheet. And then you check to see how many people actually voted in the tabulator. And then you see how many ballots are actually there. All three of those numbers should match up. That way, that's basically the triple check that Governor Wolf was thinking about when he forced the paper mandate.
Did we lose Charlie? Or Charlie, you still on?
I'm still on.
Okay. We're getting Mike. Charlie, do you have a question for Dave?
Yes, Dave. Yesterday, Governor Wolf announced that 6 counties in Pennsylvania, voters in those counties have a 1-week extension to submit mail-in ballots to election officials. Those counties are mostly limited to suburban Philadelphia. He initially announced that that change would apply to all counties. I was just wondering if you had to deal with the fallout or any situation that arose with that miscommunication, since he initially said it was all counties, including Luzerne.
I had one frantic phone call from our elections bureau where we started the process because obviously we would mean that we would have to formulate our team to be counting votes over another week. I currently have, as we speak here, 30 people counting the votes right now, spreading things out, doing things, utilizing them social distancing. And, unfortunately, we will not get the full results of this election here tonight. That unfortunately is not going to be able to be handled just because we have this sheer number of mail-in ballots. So if we had to have this election extended another week, you're talking maybe another 14 days before we finally get an answer as to who won the election here. So I'm personally pleased that we were able to say this is the election day. It's over, and let's start counting the votes, which is what we're doing right now.
So your opinion, David, as you said on my show, that this is a safe process and that we should not be concerned about any fraud or any shenanigans.
Well, listen, everybody's always concerned about these things. That's always a concern. All I'm saying is there's a triple check in place. Is there a way to try to game the system? People say, well, this could do this. There's people who have these conspiracy theories. All I'm saying is from what we've seen in Luzerne counties, that we now have a system in place that is checked numerous times and has a paper trail that people can follow all the way through. Can I stop somebody from committing voter fraud? No, that's a crime. We can never do that. But all we can do is put people in place to make sure that if that happens, we catch them and we move forward with it. But this is a safe and fair process. We got through today. We're going to keep counting our votes, and hopefully we'll get there in November.
Sam, could I just real quick though on the subject with mail voters, and I have no concerns about the county in being able to do what they're supposed to do. But when it comes to mail voting, and I think what the concerns is that it goes back to old school politics in the sense that you could create a team. If you're running for a campaign, you could go out and create a team to go after people who are going to mail in their votes and be able to get their vote and change it and be able to manipulate those votes. And I think that's one of the current concerns that's out there, in the sense that it's kind of an old school style of being able to take the vote away from the person, go grab that ballot, change those votes for what they want, and then go send it in. And I think that's one of the concerns that I'm hearing from other people out there. And maybe Tara, you could share some insight on that as well.
So I think, and you're probably referring to the ballot harvesting, and that maybe there would be this, if we have 6 counties that are having election week, whereas our counties are only having election day. Number one, I think that if you're going to afford 6 counties the ability to have election week, that it's not that you're too late and your mail-in ballot is not going to count. I think that the rest of the voters, if that's going to be the case for 6 counties, I think we have to allow that for all of the voters in Pennsylvania. But from the fraud aspect, and Dave would be able to speak to this, I don't think there's a way to see who voted, unless you're internally working in the Elections Bureau, there's no way to see who actually has voted. Their mail-in's been received and they're voted, that you'd go to their house and say, hey, you requested a mail-in, you never sent it back. You have your ballot at your house. Let me pick it up from you and help you fill it out in this last week. I think the ballot harvesting then, Rick, would have to be prior to today. Correct, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, like, ballot harvesting really would come in is if an individual knows that their neighbor is going to do a mail-in ballot, and then they apply some sort of pressure to make sure that person votes their way or something along those lines. And I understand that concern, but this is the law in Pennsylvania now that we do have mail-in ballots. Honestly, I don't know how we would have pulled this election off without the mail-in ballots, because we're still working on this terms of this pandemic. I think it has to be reviewed. I think the state legislatures and the district attorneys have to review these things. Maybe there's ways we can tweak it to be better, to make sure that those issues don't come up. But 9 out of 10 voters who voted by mail this time, it worked out pretty well for them. They voted from the safety and security of their own house, didn't have to worry about going out, didn't have to worry about standing in line, didn't have to worry about getting sick. I voted by mail myself. It was a pretty smooth experience for me. We move on from there.
Well, like I say, is this, Dave, based on, the times that you've been on the show, I could restfully tell the public in Luzerne County anyway, that with your guidance and being on top of things, I feel that they should be, don't worry about being any fraud in your county, Luzerne County. You guys did a great job, really, as everyone said. You are to be complimented, seriously.
I really, truly appreciate that. We work very, very hard at these things. All we want is a fair election. I appreciate the kind words, and, let's go count some votes.
Okay. Well, you tell Charles Pedri, I'm sorry it wasn't him. Dave, if there's any other questions, folks, before we let Dave go back, I know he's going to go and get a cup of coffee now and fall asleep for an hour, but any questions anything? Okay. Dave, thanks for joining us. I appreciate that very much.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Have a good night.
Thanks, Dave.
Take care. Before we go to break, I just want you to know that from what we're seeing here, Jim Bognet is leading in the precincts, 77 reported so far, and Laura Quick is leading in the 9th Congressional District against Gary Wegman, for all of you people in Schuylkill County. So we're going to go to break right now, come back and discuss a little bit more, okay?
Your vote on SSPTV News.
Thanks for staying with us, folks. You're watching Your Vote 2020 on SSPTV, and our thanks to the Hazleton Standard Speaker and also the team. Our team has been working daily to bring as much information as possible. Speaking of information, I said before that according to what we're reading right now, as of now, 77 precincts in, it looks like Jim Bognet's ahead, but of course, there's a lot to be told here, and Laura Quick in Schuylkill County. I want to get to you, Rick, in term about talk about the Republican candidates that are running. And then I'd like to make a comment as to how we get information to the public. Because you know that I'm a person that's concerned about substance. I don't care how many billboards and signs you have and how many 30-second commercials you get, because I can make anyone look great with a 30-second. I can even make the Cosmo look great on a 30-second commercial.
That's a push.
And have people crying after they hear it. My God, we got to vote for Mike, but he could have no substance whatsoever. Certainly not with you, Mike. But so with that being said, I'm a little disappointed that I did not have as many congressional people come on the Sam Lassant show to voice their concerns and what they're all about. But however, let's get to you, Rick, and give me your input as to how the candidates are and what your opinion is on these Republican candidates.
So, when you look at this this field, there's 6 Republican candidates going up against Matt Cartwright, which let me first tell you that this district is built for Matt Cartwright. Matt Cartwright beat former Congressman Tim Holden when he still had Pottsville, which is a stronghold for Tim Holden. So this is a very strong Democratic district. You have 6 candidates, and I'm a firm believer. Unfortunately, we don't have the information coming in like we usually do, but people vote a lot for where people are at. And obviously in a congressional race, who raises the most money is where you have an opportunity to get yourself out on the news and in the media. In a nutshell, 6 candidates. You have 3 candidates here from Lower Luzerne County. You have Jim Bognett, you have Mike Marsicano, and you have Mike Camisa. The key to those individuals are really controlling their base, but they will get their votes and they will cut each other out. You have Harry Haas, who I served on with county council, who's from the Wilkes-Barre area, teacher up in the Dallas area, and there's no question he's going to get votes from name recognition up there. And then you got 2 other individuals from the north, Daniels as well as Earl Granville, who are 2 veterans, and again, some heavy commercials by these gentlemen. So the interesting thing for me are 2 things. Number one, how are these mail votes coming in, and how are they going to affect this election? Are they counted right now? And 2, how are the votes being sliced and diced throughout this relatively large district? And that's something I think, unfortunately, we're not going to have those numbers tonight, but I'll be interested to see how that's all broken out.
Charles, your political analysis of the candidates.
This district, represented by Cartwright, went for Donald Trump in significant margins in 2016, which makes Cartwright, despite his higher level seniority as co-chair of the Democratic Policy Communications Committee in Congress, that doesn't really matter in this scenario because there is an element of vulnerability considering the voter base here. Rick made an important point about the geographical loyalty in Luzerne County, especially in the Hazleton area where we have 3 vying for Greater Hazleton's votes. It will be interesting to see how the results play out between Mike Marsicano versus Jim Bognett, because you can almost argue that Marsicano is trying to paint Bognett as this Jeb Bush-like figure. This guy, this Washington establishment guy who hasn't been around in years, comes back, has a super PAC. He's really running those attack ads. And then meantime, Marsicano was Trumpian before Donald Trump. I mean, in many ways, Marsicano prefigured the Trump era, not only when he's run for other offices, but when he was mayor of Hazleton. And so many factors in play. And then in addition to that, how will the results play for Earl Granville? At an organic level, there appeared to be passion for his campaign and his compelling story, especially early on when he announced. Will the results tell us that passion held, or will Bognett, who ran an extremely disciplined, organized campaign, prevail, especially with margins coming in from Southern Luzerne County?
Michael, your input.
Yes, Sam. Obviously, the Congressman Cartwright got a free pass in the primary, so he didn't have to go into his tremendous war chest. And the big difference for him running this time, and you have to remember, he won in 2016, even though Donald Trump did win the district that he's running in. But at the top of the ticket this time is not going to be Hillary Clinton, who didn't come into Luzerne County for 5 seconds. It's going to be Joe Biden, the Scranton favorite son. So the way this district is gerrymandered, the vote, I think, is going to be as heavy as you've ever seen in your lifetime out of the Scranton Wilkes-Barre area, because one of their own is running for president, or that's how they look at it. On the Republican side, as Rick said, and I agree totally, I feel that if there was only one candidate from Hazleton, we could probably write in one of them as a winner tonight. Both of them had the biggest war chest. Both had over $300,000 if you go to the website and see what was available to spend. Now, how much of that they actually spent, we won't know until the final reports come out. I'm privy to some information that I heard was done in the polling by a reputable pollster, and it had Bognett up by about 10 points. And it had Granville and Teddy Daniels and Marsicano pretty much in the 20% range, Bognett with about 30%. And from what you're saying, Sammy, with the early results, it appears that might be the way it's coming in. but it depends on where the vote is coming from and who got their vote out today. Again, professionally run campaign by Bognet, I thought, very professionally run, but he had the big dollars at his disposal.
Tara, your input.
Yes, Sam. So I'm just looking at the Lackawanna County numbers right now. I think it's really important. We had 6 candidates in this congressional race, and 4 of them are from Luzerne County, so in the southernmost part of this district, which is a big congressional district. And when you look at Scranton, the mail-in ballots in Lackawanna County, there were 34,000 mail-in ballots. Luzerne County, we had estimated 40,000 mail-ins, but 34,000 mail-ins in Lackawanna County, and that's slightly more than half of the votes cast in 2016 in that primary. So, I mean, that's a lot of votes. I know the candidate Earl Granville, one of the veterans that was running, he's from Lackawanna County. So it's interesting where the candidates pull from. Jim Bognet right now in the news is coming in as a front runner, which was a difficult task considering that you have 4 Luzerne County candidates and 3 of them are from the same place in the Hazleton area, from Hazleton City. We have political newcomer Mike Camisa. He's a do-gooder and a young prospect here down in our community. And then Mike Marsicano, who's been a staple for many years and is very well known. So we have, it's a really interesting race. It just makes it difficult if we're having not election day, we're having election week, and we don't know the numbers that we're seeing being reported by the media right now and on the Luzerne County website and the other county websites. We don't know if that includes this large amount of mail-ins. Unprecedented.
Getting back to Michael, I mentioned about the fact that we need to know some information about these candidates. Never had a problem with candidates coming on, particularly Tara will be my guest. We'll start airing her show on Thursday. Mike, were the candidates able to let the voters know about where they stand, what they're going to do for the voters? Were there any forums or because I'm not aware of any, I'm sure there was one in Monroe or County, et cetera. Were there any forums that these voters had an opportunity to express what they're all about and what they're going to do?
Sammy, none that I know of. In fact, you made the point, and not because it's your show, I was surprised these candidates didn't use the local shows like yours because there were no political rallies due to COVID. I mean, the door-to-door, forget about, there wasn't your typical type of election. I don't know of any organized activity at all in the Democratic Party. So again, unless they hit the ground running early back in January and February, that was mostly the petition signing, where you'd get to meet some of the party kingmakers. And I know, especially in Jim Bognet's case, he spent a lot of time in the upper end of the county in Lackawanna County because he was new to the area, frankly, as Rick pointed out. And, you know, I know that's where he spent a lot of his early time, but I didn't see him appear on any of the local shows. And then I didn't hear of any rallies on the Republican side at all.
Rick, your response to that as to, was there any places where we were able to hear? I mean, everyone knows Mike Marsicano. He was the mayor. So they know what Mike's all about.
No, well, I mean, you know, remember, this was a different type of race. The COVID hit. All of a sudden, you could not go out and campaign. You couldn't go knock on doors. You couldn't go shake hands. So I think these candidates took a different approach of obviously raising money, putting them on the news. But, you know, the truth is, when you looked at the number, there was no debate. And there's no reason why someone could not do a debate via Zoom and have them go back and forth. With all due respect, I mean, they're all very good candidates, but what I saw was candidates basically either following Trump, if you're with Trump or not, if you voted for Trump in the past or you didn't vote for Trump, kind of maybe going after each other. But if you ask me, where do they stand on multiple issues and how do they differ? Yeah. I couldn't tell you on that.
Yes.
you know what? Should be no reason why we could sit in the basement, have a Zoom, have a drink, and talk to each other, and you can't get 6 candidates on a Zoom and be able to challenge each other and have a debate. So hopefully that changes for the next election.
I got to tell you, I'm very frustrated because yes, you do pay for the Sam Lassant show. There's no question about it, because no one gives me any for nothing. I have to pay for airtime. But I was very disappointed to see that not one of the candidates, other than Jim Bognet, I think we had him on in March, where they responded as to, so we could ask him these questions. Okay, like I said, everyone knows Mike Marsicano because he's been around and they know who he is and what he could do. So that was a plus for Mike. But as far as Mike Camisa and Earl Granville and Teddy Daniels, you think that they would come on and so we could ask them these questions. So I was a little disappointed in that. People talk about local television and local neighborhood programs. We want to thank the sponsors that we have, and I did a special commercial on that because they keep us going, okay? And so with that being said, Sam, we're going to go to break. We come back, we'll wrap some things up. We're going to end at 9:30. Hopefully we'll have some additional information. So let's go to break right now.
Your vote on SSPTV News.
Welcome back to Your Vote 2020, folks. You're watching us on SSPTV. I'm Sam Lassant, joined by Mike DeCosmo, Charles McAwee, Rick Morelli, and Tara Tuhill. I want to thank the people here in the control room, Janine, Tara, of course, we thank you, the entire news team working on remote, Kenny, Lisa, John, Jennifer, Tim, Service Electric Cablevision. Nothing would be possible without them. And of course, our friends at the Standard Speaker. My question to all of you is, what do we have to look for in November? Let me start with Tara. We got about 10 minutes, 15 minutes left. Tara, what are we looking for in November?
Well, a positive that came from the county manager was just that we are going to have regular voting, that we'll be back to our old polling places. And that's what they're trying to do on the county level for voting. So there will still be mail-in ballots, and we'll still be dealing with mail-in ballots, but that we won't have to all go to mass polling centers, hopefully. And I think that's what the people out there want to hear. That's the question we hear the most, is when can we be back to normal? When is it going to be safe for us to be back to normal? And for the children in Pennsylvania, one of the things is, when can they go back to school? At one point, the Secretary of Education for all of Pennsylvania said that we would not go back until January. And that's a real concern, that we have children that are not being seen by teachers. We have children that are lost in the system in all of our counties across Pennsylvania, all of our school districts. There's children that they cannot find, that haven't been educated since March. And so we've also had child abuse reports are down 50% because children are not being seen by pediatricians and they're not being seen by teachers. And those are the two top reporters of child abuse. So really, for a myriad of reasons, people want to get back to normal. And I think the sooner that we can do that safely, it will be very good for us. I spoke with a farmer recently who said, he's a farmer, and he said, you do not quarantine the healthy. Everything about what we've done goes against all the medical teachings. We have doctors that complain about it, and we have farmers in agriculture. They say you quarantine the farm animals that are sick. Those are the ones that you quarantine and keep away from the rest. So, I mean, we have a lot to learn from this, and a lot of preparation for if we do have a spike or a peak, or a second wave coming. But we really want to get back safely as best we can, and resume normal life.
Well, I'm looking forward to our interview on the set. We'll be airing your show on Thursday. Rick, a couple of minutes as to what we have to look for in November.
Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about the upcoming election, the presidential election. Obviously, I think a couple of people heard that there's a presidential election come up in November, and I would say that it's going to be a very passionate election. I think that this time around, if you thought in 2016 was tough, look out in 2020, because you have people who are passionate Trump lovers and you have people who are passionate Trump haters. And it's going to get exciting. It's going to get very vocal, social media, if you haven't seen already. And again, we're seeing a different type of a campaign with social media out there and how it's going to be used and so forth. So buckle in. It's going to get exciting. Let's express our views. Let's be safe. Let's do the right thing and not go out there and do the things we're seeing what's happening out there. But at the end of the campaign, the election, we're still going to be America. We're still going to be one people, and let's move on and let's start acting like Americans and all together, no matter what your party.
Rick, thank you. Charlie.
Well, each week it feels like one cataclysm after another. You can't really foresee what will happen tomorrow. This has just been such an exhausting, unbelievable year. So it's really hard to project what will happen in November. But at the political level, yes, this will be a referendum on the Trump presidency, and it can come down to as simple as that. And I think there are three important parts to watch out for in November, and it really will come down to three regions: northeastern Pennsylvania, the Lehigh Valley, and suburban Philadelphia. Luzerne was one of three counties in 2016 that went from Obama to Trump. Northampton County in the Lehigh Valley, will that stick to Trump or will that reject his presidency? I think you can argue that Luzerne County will come out in significant numbers for Trump's reelection. This was the county that delivered his primary victory. It delivered the margins necessary for his electoral college votes in the general election. And I think enough people are disgusted with everything that has gone on with the pandemic combined with the lockdowns that they will respond accordingly in November. Pan out to the state, you look to suburban Philadelphia. Many of those moderate suburban parents have children living in Philadelphia this week. They're living in neighborhoods like Fishtown, and they're frightened. And the question is, will they either not go to the polls or will they flock to Biden? I mean, of course, that region is almost like Joe Biden's protectorate. I think Joe Biden country is really suburban Philadelphia. It's not northeastern Pennsylvania. He may fancy himself a native son, and he did grow up here until he was 7. But I don't think, with the exception of Lackawanna County, this region will come out for Biden at all.
Thank you, Charlie. Michael, your opinion. We got about 4 minutes.
Okay, I'll take all 4, Sam. But a couple things. Hopefully, I think we saw, whether we're Democrat or Republican, how well things could run when both parties work together. You started the show tonight talking about the politics. I look at what's happened in Washington and Harrisburg over the past 3 months, and I saw some remarkable things. I saw Democrats and Republicans getting together in a bipartisan manner and passing the PPP relief plan for small businesses to be able to stay in business. That was a bipartisan bill. I saw the work in Harrisburg, and I saw the work also out of Washington, where they've extended the unemployment benefits for people. We wouldn't be talking about a deep recession now. We'd be talking about a severe recession if that extra $600 a week wasn't given to people who've lost their jobs. These are bipartisan approaches. We have Tara Toohill here on the show tonight. Tara, we know, is a Republican. It's no secret I'm a Democrat, and my wife, Linda, is the president of the school board. Tara and my wife got together in conjunction with the superintendent of our school district, Brian Uppinger. They approached private industry. They approached Robert Miracle and got a $200,000 grant to buy tablets for children of the Hazleton area school district. I think hopefully people will realize that when Democrats and Republicans work together, a lot of good things could happen.
I couldn't agree with you more, Michael. Believe me, and the sad part about doing Zoom is I can't pick on you enough, you see? When we're on set, I can pick on you, but I can't pick on you, okay? The only thing that I'm always confused about, and, you know, I'm not speaking, but, you know, we had an economy that we had more people working than ever before. We had more women working. We had more Hispanic working. We had more African Americans working. We had the retirement funds doing extremely well. Okay, so I don't know, you know, what else to say when you had the success And I don't care whether it was a Democrat president or a Republican president. It happened to be a Republican president. So with all that success that we had, I don't understand, where the fault is here. But we're certainly going to discuss it. We're going to have special shows coming on with Rick Morelli and Charlie McAway is putting together a dynamite program. We're going to be starting to do some things in August. Once again, my friends, I want to thank everyone who was giving us a lot of support. And you're right, Mike, the PPP loan would really helped a lot of people. I would hope that it would continue, but everything comes to an end. Tara, looking forward to seeing you on the show. We'll have Mayor Jeff Cassatt on the Sam Lassant show. I appreciate the input that you had, that you were giving us. Michael, looking at, just to sum it up, maybe 30 seconds, do you think that this thing is going to hang on? I think Charlie brought an excellent point. The last time we saw Joe Biden, he was here when he was 7 years old. I mean, are you voting for a guy because he's from your hometown, or is you voting for a person that has, it could do something? Your quick opinion on that.
Well, I think Joe has maintained a presence in northeastern Pennsylvania. He's been speaker in many Scranton events, Wilkes-Barre events over the past decade, Friendly Sons, some of the big organizations up there. Like I said, when I was county chairman, we begged Hillary Clinton to come into Luzerne County. She didn't spend 5 seconds in Luzerne County, where Donald Trump ran two of the biggest rallies up in Mohegan Sun I think I've ever seen in the history of the county. So first rule of politics, Sammy, you have to ask, you have to be around. If Trump spends as much time here as he did 4 years ago versus Biden, then it's going to be closer. Otherwise, I think it's a big victory for Biden in northeastern PA.
Sam, real quick, I remember last time Joe Biden was here, he had about 200 people up in that gymnasium, if I'm not mistaken. So I think he's on his way up here in Lackawanna County.
Charlie, come on. You got to say something, Charlie.
No, I mean, look, I think at that same rally, he realized that Trump was going to win. And the question is, how will the turnout be for any Biden event in the coming months? Lackawanna County voters are loyal to the Democratic Party, no matter what happens. Yeah. So it all comes down to the margins in Luzerne.
Yeah, give me 30 seconds. We got to pick on Mike. I have to. I just can't end this program without picking on my buddy Mike the Cosmo. Tara?
Oh, I didn't hear you say. I thought you said my name.
Yeah.
I just think that right now what we're going through with the rioting and the racial issues that we're having, that it's incredible to me that the media has sidestepped and overlooked a racial comment that was made by Joe Biden, a presidential candidate. And I think that has to be talked about, and it's not being talked about enough. And with the PPP, the Paycheck Protection, here in Pennsylvania, because of our governor and his policies, many businesses are unable to benefit from that paycheck protection as they should, because they've been closed. So that only benefited companies that were open and able to operate. So we have a lot of businesses, small businesses, that were shut off from that federal aid that is really loan forgiveness, if it's played right. So yes. We have a lot, hopefully by opening Pennsylvania businesses, that second wave of PPP, small businesses in Pennsylvania will be able to benefit from it.
Mike
says, partisan, but I wanted to just bring up two of those issues there. That we do have to have policies that unite people, and we have to be careful with the way that we use our words. And I think that's important in a presidential candidate. And it's important in a governor.
That is why I would hope that Mike DeCosmo still stays in politics, because I got to tell you, he is an honest person. He was one of the best Democratic chairmen that I think Luzerne County had, and always has been upfront. And I don't believe for one moment that Mike DeCosmo believes in the Democrat platform the way it's presented. If he did, I'd be shocked. But Mike, I got to compliment you. You truly, if we had more people like you in the Democrat Party, we've been in great shape. But once again, I want to thank all of you for coming on the show. Mike, Charles, Rick, and Tara. Looking forward to on the Sam Lassant show. And once again, all our sponsors that participate in the show, the way we exist. And I want to thank all the sponsors and all of the viewers who have been good to us. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us on Your Vote 2020. We'll have a lot more for you before the election in November. And folks, it's local neighborhood programming. And I got to tell you, since this quarantine, our numbers, thank God, have been going through the roof. Hence my disappointment why some of the congressional candidates did not take advantage of it. However, hopefully in November, Mike, you can kick some people up and revenue. All right, we'll see you next time. Thanks again for joining us.
Watch us online anytime at ssptv.com and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.